Based on a study conducted by Master Recruiting in 2022, 9 out of 10 employers say they are unable to fill positions because of a skills gap. 29% agree that the skills gap has increased compared to a year ago. In a recent interview conducted by Tony Wagner, author of The Global Achievement Gap, he shared his list of 7 survival skills that all young people will need to be successful in career, college, and citizenship. According to him, the ability to ask good questions and to lead by influence are 2 critical skills identified as by the employers today. These skills, along with agility, adaptability, initiative, entrepreneurship, curiosity, and imagination, are often referred to as soft skills, but there is nothing soft about them. They are fundamental for success in the workplace, but they are not always emphasized in high schools today. We gather here today to discuss how we can prepare the next workforce to the labor market, how to shift our focus from grades to skills, and as career counselors, in what better way can we allow our teenagers today to experience what they look forward to for the next couple of years. Remember, one day you may be the reason behind the next great success story. For this, it is with great pleasure that I welcome a special guest for his opening remarks. Dr. Ger Graus OBE needs no introduction here at Kidzania. His presence graces our halls times and time again, inspiring both young minds and seasoned professionals alike with his wisdom and passion for education. As the Global Director of Education at Kidzania and the tireless advocate for empowering youth, Dr. Graus embodies the spirit of innovation and dedication that defines our mission here today at Career Village. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Ger Graus to the stage.
Thank you, Seta. It's as ever a pleasure to be here and an honor to be with you. It's been an interesting couple of days because people historically have told us that Kidzania is for 7 and 8-year-olds. But when you change the environment and you change the passion and you change the aspiration, Kidzania is for 99-year-olds. So we've got to stop sticking children and people in boxes, and we need to work harder to make the world work for them. And that, in essence, is what Future Pathways education is about. I'm truly honored to be here, and I'd like to thank a few people before I start. I'd like to thank my now 28-year-old daughter, Anna, who was a very shy 10-year-old, and who came to me one day and said, "Daddy, I'd like to play the flute." So I bought her a flute, and she went for flute lessons, and not long afterwards she was playing in the school orchestra, and not long after that she played a solo, and not ever so long after that she started singing and won the school competition. Anna now is very successful, working for the largest private PR company in the world out of London. Playing the flute made her successful. We need to think about schooling and education differently. There are no straight lines. We need to follow the aptitudes of the young people, and we need to get to know them better. And the biggest thing we can give them is self-belief and self-confidence, and the rest will flow. Mathematics on its own is a pointless exercise. I would like to thank QCDC, our friends and partners, for making this happen and making this happen with us, as indeed our friends at the Ministry of Education and Higher Education. I'd like to thank all our friends and partners, the industry partners, and indeed the friends who've come, and this is a first, the friends who've come from the UK, who've come from Poland, and who've come from Austin, Texas. This hasn't happened before either. So, you know what? We're getting noticed. That's quite good, isn't it? I'd like to thank Kidzania Doha. I'd like to thank Victor for his vision, his amazing colleagues, because it starts everywhere. This is really important to me, every time I walk in, this is the cleanest Kidzania in the world. We create an environment that is conducive to learning and experiences. Every single bit fits. I believe in jigsaws. I'd like to thank Seta, who always says the nicest things about me and who really is the heartbeat behind all these events. Whatever the question, education is always the answer. I was very fortunate some years ago to share a vanilla ice cream with my then friend, the Archbishop Desmond Tutu in Cape Town. And we were talking about what was difficult. And he said, because he's a former teacher, he said, schooling is easy because schooling is operational. Education is difficult because education is about trust. It's about environment. It's about aspirations. And most importantly, it is about the young people and knowing them, knowing the learners. We need to remember that what we have at the moment is a system, a schooling system, that arrives from the first industrial revolution, when mass schooling led to mass employment. We are now living in the age of personalization, entrepreneurship, online this and online that. Yet we're still schooling as if we are in the first industrial revolution. We need to educate as well as school. And events like these and partnerships like we have make that happen. That's me. And I like being the Lego man. And I like being with you. It's important. I say this to children quite often. If you had an office, what would you put on your door? And the answer I get is the name and the title. And then I say to them, what would you like that title to mean? Is it an operational thing? Or is it about kindness and accommodating other people? Is it about becoming me? Or is it about what people want you to be? So on my office door, I have quite a big sign. And that's the bit that it says. We were talking today about futures. And sometimes I get a little bit scared because we forget today. Future 2030, future 2040, future 2050. But as the great Mahatma Gandhi said, what happens in the future, we decide today. It starts now. Actually, it started yesterday. And we need to be brave and courageous. We need to think about different partnerships. And we have to put the child in the middle. And when you, in any discussion, however difficult that may be, between ministries and organizations and schools and whatever else, the minute you put the picture of a child in the middle, the conversation becomes much easier because the focus is clear. I'd like to think that today you will take with you, you know me and technology, right? You'd like to take with you something to put in your back pocket. One memory, one thought, one little bit that says, I'm going to try that. Or that says, I disagree with that. Or that says, I hadn't thought of this. I wanted to start by spending a few minutes on thinking about where we are now, that schooling agenda.
Training fleas requires a glass jar with a lid. The fleas are placed inside the jar and the lid is then sealed. They are left undisturbed for 3 days. Then, when the jar is opened, the fleas will not jump out. In fact, the fleas will never jump higher than the level set by the lid. Their behaviour is now set for the rest of their lives. And, when these fleas reproduce, their offspring will automatically follow their example.
So our system is about lids, it's about jars, it's about what other people think our children should be. And we need to, collectively, in the nicest possible way, become a little bit disruptive. Lift the lid, and when we're brave enough and we get the chance, we need to shatter the jar. We need to move away from that definition of insanity. That thing about, if we do more of the same, things will improve. It doesn't work. It has never worked. And we need to be brave enough to discount it. We need to think that so many things have changed. And I saw on the flight, on the Qatar Airways flight, just in case they're here, on the Qatar Airways flight, I saw an image online, and that was the image of the first flight by the Wright brothers and the landing on the moon. And there was 66 years between those two events. There is approximately 66 years between those two images. And the only difference I see, apart from the fact that one photograph is in color and one is in black and white, the only difference I see is that they had blackboards and they had whiteboards. So in schooling, we need to move faster. We need to move differently. We need to be braver. We were talking earlier about cultural capital. Yeah, we need to start to use what's around us and use it positively. And we need to look at data. If we want to know our children, we need to look at data from elsewhere, not teach and test attendance figures. We need to know more. And I wanted to tell you a little bit in a few seconds about this. You know what Kidzania is. You also probably know that it's a global organization with around 25 worldwide. You know that when the children come in, the learning is independent. And you know that for us to track them, they have bracelets and they log into every activity. And that means that we can find them if we need to find them. It also means we know their choices. So I worked with the analysts across a number of Kidzanias and said, I want to know the first choice a child makes, the first job they do on their first visit. And our sample stands at nearly 600,000 now. Once we had the sample, the question became, who are those children? Are they boys? Are they girls? Are they black? Are they white? Are they rich? Are they poor? Are they urban? Are they rural? Are they 4? Are they 14? And all of that went into the mix. And some very clever people from lots and lots and lots of universities. He's called Izana. I love him. He goes to a school in Sheffield. And lots of people from lots of universities did the analysis. And the findings were, remember, data from elsewhere, getting to know the children. The findings were, come on, Izana. There we are. The findings were, all stereotypes are set at the age of 4. Boys are pilots, girls are cabin crew. And so it goes across the piece. There's almost no, second finding, almost no changes between the age of 4 and the age of 14. The stereotypes remain. We spent a fortune in school on STEM subjects and girls in technology and science. But the one thing we forget, if the black poor girl from inner London has never seen a black female pilot, then children can only aspire to what they know exists. So we need to show and tell. We need to provide those opportunities. The third finding, as a father of 2 girls, I struggled with, girls globally, regardless of their background, choose activities below their age range. 9-year-old girls choose 7-year-old activities. 9-year-old boys choose 9 or 10-year-old activities. You can draw your own conclusions about self-esteem and self-confidence and society's expectation on young women. But you can also say, if you're a teacher, and I've now told you this, and your class with 10 boys and 10 girls walks in, you can no longer ignore that fact. You have to think differently, and you have to provide differently. And then children can only aspire to what they know exists. Children from poor backgrounds make poor choices. The children from poor backgrounds don't choose the aeroplane, the operating theatre, the television studio, grey advertising. They choose cleaning windows, making beds in a hotel, working in a supermarket, or being a courier. They need 5 visits before they enter the aeroplane. If we want to create equity, we need to find the resources for them to have 5 visits. It's really easy. We need to prioritize differently. I spent quite a bit of time talking to 250 businesses inside Manchester Airport. And I asked them, if you are interviewing an 18-year-old tomorrow, what 3 things are you looking for? And then, so we got 250 answers times 3, and we did our mathematical stuff. There are the answers. These are the skills and attributes that we are looking for in today's learner. Do you recognize them? I don't think anybody would disagree, right? I'm going to let you in on a secret. I asked that question in 1999. That slide is 25 years old. Nothing's changed. Technology still matters. Communication, the technology may have changed, but those principles remain. Yeah, and communication still matters. They're all still there. So we've got to stop thinking about education and schooling as short-term processes. They're long-term processes. We need to be patient and we need to be with our young people. We need to recognize that the environment is the third teacher. If you want to learn about flying, don't sit in a classroom, don't learn from a textbook, go to the airport. If you want to know what it's like to be a heart transplant surgeon, go online, find out, or better still, talk to one. We need to connect with realism. And realism, incidentally, and is really important, we now have another environment. We talk about the virtual environment. It's not really virtual, it's real. It's just a different form of an environment that actually allows us to be much more creative and that allows us to write better the narrative of the possible and to adapt greater to the needs of our young people. We need to harness the greatest invention of all time, the internet. We haven't even started. Yeah, and can I please ask you, if you have a phone with you, in a minute to all get your phone out. I've always wanted to do this. Because in the class and in school, what we say is, it's 2024, can you all put your phone away for the next 6 hours? Because we're not going to pretend that it's 1954. We need to kind of become a bit more courageous around these things. We need to understand that we can't do things on our own. The days of things on our own are gone. Partnership, meaningful, honest, trustful partnership in the interest of children. Return on involvement instead of return on investment. Making a difference and making money. That's cool. But let's have a purpose rather than the purpose just being money. Friendship is also about jigsaws. I love jigsaws. And actually, it's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because when you see the single piece of a jigsaw, you don't know what it's part of. You just see the single piece. When you put them together, you can truly see the bigger picture. And I've brought my own little jigsaw. I'm a bit of a sad man like that. I brought my own little jigsaw over from the UK. And this is my Future Pathways jigsaw. And I start with entrepreneurship. I think every individual is an entrepreneur. A social entrepreneur, a business entrepreneur, a community entrepreneur. What does entrepreneur mean? It means somebody who is courageous enough to take action when they see a perceived need. It's not some big thing, and we need to be careful with wording. I once asked some children in Dubai what entrepreneurs were, and the answer I got was they're people who drive Bugattis. No, that's the wrong picture. Entrepreneur is about the right thing and is about people. Entrepreneurship. So we have two llamas in the audience, Hugo and Cassie. They are from Startup Sherpas. They've come over from the UK. What do? They work on entrepreneurship. They work on very often face-to-face, because not everything is online, and neither should it be. They work face-to-face, and their investment is essentially that experience is everything. And what's really brilliant is, when you work with them, you can make mistakes, and you can learn from them. School doesn't allow us to make mistakes because we get red marks. And they certainly don't give us the time to learn from our mistakes. Writing the narrative of the possible. Here we are. Writing the narrative of the possible is about building environments that you could otherwise not access. Interacting with those environments, and that is what my friends from Metaverse Learning do. I have a dream. I have a dream. I one day will want to see a Kidzania online, because when the children leave here, Their eyes are big, they're excited, they want more. And we need to provide opportunities for them to go home and go, I want to find out more. And different, and in a fun way. And we'll get there. And the organizations exist. People who are not here today, sadly, I think somebody's jinxing this. There we go. People who are not here today, sadly, are my friends from my past, but I do want to flag them up because they engage with careers education in primary schools. And all I want to say to you is if the stereotypes are set at the age of 4, and we don't talk to our young people about their futures until they're 14, we give the stereotype permission to cement itself for 10 years, and we kid ourselves that we can still make a difference. We need to start earlier. And underneath all of that, there we go. Underneath all of that, we need to measure what we value. When we do these things, when we talk about set soft skills, there's no such thing as soft. When we look at alternative means of educating, we need to find alternative means of measuring. The last thing we can do is do all of these things and then say, how did you do in geography? Yeah, the relevance gets lost. So we need to be brave and we need to come up with schemes that allow measurements to be meaningful for everybody, for the child, for the school, for the employment sector, for everybody. And that's what we have with My Global Bridge. We need to really understand. I love that slide. It's from a painting in New York, the Algonquin Club, that no essence can be measured by a yardstick. And I want to give you an example from Kidzania, London, where there's a newspaper activity. So the young people produce the front page of a newspaper in English, right? So it's English. And one girl said to me once, when I go home and I tell my granddad that I had an A in English, he doesn't know what an A in English means. So we never have a real conversation. When I take my newspaper front page home, he doesn't stop talking to me. It takes a village to educate a child. We need to create those environments for that to happen. We need to think about equity, equality, and the reality of it. When we know our children better, we can focus on personalized learning. When we focus on personalized learning, we know better where to put our resources. Whether that is between girls and boys, whether that is between rich and poor, whether that is between black and white, or indeed in geographies or age ranges. When we know better, we can act better and live more fairly. Oops, sorry. Somebody needs to put clicker on their birthday list, I think. Here we go. We need to think about wilding the tame. Now, everybody in here and everybody in the world wants their children to be safe. It's beyond question. But I challenge you that we are too obsessed with the safety agenda and that we are losing sight of calculated risk. Usain Bolt would never have been so fast if he hadn't fallen over and learned how to stand up. We need to actually move towards free-range learning. We need to let them out there and we need to let them go. And that's in a sense what this is. But we need to utilize all the places that provide this and we need to make that part of our provision. And of course, brilliantly, we can let them go online, can't we? But we also need to let them go in the real world. Our schools need to change what they are. Our schools need to become more than a school. They need to become community centers where communities feel that they can go, where children feel that they belong, and where they become more than just a good geographer, but where they become a traveler. Yeah, where the journey to becoming me begins, where we build scaffolding so that they can climb as high as they can possibly go, and at the same time we have a safety net just in case they fall. but we cannot prevent them from climbing. We need to think about who we are. That's the children's hospital in the States, and the window cleaners dress up as superheroes. How cool is that, right? We, you, everybody, teachers, our supervisors out there, they are role models. When these 7-year-old children come in here, that's not a supervisor. That's a real pilot in their eyes. Teachers are role models. Parents are role models. We need to be aware of that responsibility. And it isn't just the role model of how to become a doctor, how to become an engineer, or how to become an architect. It is also the role model of who opens the door, who picks up the litter, who is kind. It's an enormous responsibility we carry, but we should carry it well. And finally, here we go. And finally, all of you, your parents, your brothers, your sisters, your grandparents, you all tell stories, experiences. Share your stories with young people. My granddad was a coal miner. My granddad had bad lungs. He had arthritis. He was born in 1891. He saw the first car in the village with a man with a red flag walking in front of it, just in case people and animals would be scared. He died 6 months after the first man landed on the moon. There were 2 world wars in between, several recessions, television, radio, and whatever else. My granddad's stories are here now today. My granddad, incidentally, also couldn't read and write, and I remember my granny reading him the newspaper every morning. So when my son, in 2019, graduated from Oxford University with a degree in English literature, and I stood in the middle, I understood what social mobility is. And I also understood how important my grandfather's story is. Sorry, I still get emotional. Actually, no, I'm not sorry. I just get emotional. I wanted to give you a flavor of what we can do and of the role that you and your organizations can play. Keep joining us, right? These brilliant people here, and keep putting the child in the middle. So I'm going to be quiet now because there are much more interesting people than me coming. But as always, it has been an absolute privilege to share the stage with you. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for being here.
Yes, seriously. Thank you.
Dr. Graus, your insights have not only enlightened us, but have also ignited this fire within us to strive for excellence and pursue our passions with vigor. We kindly ask you to remain with us on stage as we invite our panelists to moderate the discussion for the day.
Please.
Without further ado, let's please join me in welcoming our lineup of panelists. It is my pleasure to extend a warm welcome to Mr. Hugo Pickford, representing Startup SHERPAS. Mr. Pickford's expertise in guiding and mentoring aspiring entrepreneurs through the challenging terrain of startup ventures has earned him widespread admiration and acclaim. His commitment to fostering innovation and supporting the next generation of business leaders is truly commendable. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Pickford to the stage. It is my great pleasure to introduce our second panelist with a keen understanding of how technology can be harnessed to engage and empower high school students. Mr. Holt brings with him a wealth of experience and expertise in the realm of immersive learning and virtual platforms. As the founder, his work at Metaverse Learning has been instrumental in revolutionizing the way we approach education and career preparation. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Jason Holt to the stage. Our third panelist for today's discussion brings with him a wealth of knowledge and experience in the realm of global connectivity and career development. As a key figure at Global Bridge, his work focuses on fostering connections and opportunities for students to engage with the global labor market, providing them with invaluable insights. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Ben Mason to the stage. Last but not least, our final panelist for today, Dr. Tajalsir Kardaman from QCDC. Dr. Kardaman's reputation precedes him as a distinguished leader in the field of career development. Through his work at QCDC, he has been instrumental in empowering countless young individuals with the skills, knowledge, and resources needed. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Tajalsir to the stage. Dr. Ger, the stage is yours.
Widow's cards, please.
Yes.
Thank you.
Right, I always enjoy grilling people. It's quite nice, isn't it? Because I can now ask the questions and they need to give me the answers. I'm absolutely delighted that everybody's here. I mentioned earlier the role of QCDC, and of course I mentioned individually the roles of experiences, everything, of writing the narrative of the possible and of measuring what we value. And I think when you put those together, the picture you get from that jigsaw is substantial. So I've got a few questions. I've asked the panelists to be, for a very good reason, brief in their answers, because I also want to create the time at the end for you to ask your questions and you to interact with the panel. So in the first instance, at every first question, please, if you just would tell us a little bit about who you are. I know Seth has done it, but most importantly, about your organization and why does your organization exist? Because why is such an important question, isn't it? And so nearest to me, Hugo. Nice to see you. Hugo, so in a nutshell, tell us a little bit about Startup Sherpas. I got that wrong. Why, what, who, for, and how. And it's unusual. It does unusual things because unusual was needed, I think, would be first.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. So I am one of the founders at Startup Sherpas, and we teach teenagers how to bring their ideas to life. And we do that because as we look around the world, what we see are the problems we need to solve globally, locally, and in our communities are all the tricky types of problems that can be classed as systemic issues. So my co-founder, Kathy, who's sitting over there, worked on a project to make vaccines insurable when they hit the African continent. And it turns out that that is the exact sort of systemic issue that is immensely difficult to solve. It takes several governments working together, tens of NGOs working together, thousands of people across continents, across companies. And they all have to be able to share that vision together. And at the moment, our education system isn't giving them the tools to be able to do that job. So we train teenagers to have a process so that we can create a whole generation of highly skilled innovators who are able to make the change that we need to see in the world at the speed that we need to see it. I will stop there.
Tell us a little bit, Hugo, about the partnership, because what all of these people have in common is they don't do things on their own, right? And your partnerships in what you achieve are unusual. And when I got home after my very first meeting with Hugo and Kathy, I said to my then 16-year-old, I think Imogen was at the time, I've met people who are involved in paid work experience for teenagers. I think it was probably the fastest run to a mobile phone and entry to a website I've ever seen of a 16-year-old. So tell us a bit about the partnership thing.
Certainly. So what we found the biggest challenge in engaging teenagers in education to be is to capture their attention in a world where everyone is trying to capture their attention, and particularly social media has done such a good job of capturing it. And it turns out we uncovered a universal truth. Teenagers love money. I've asked every teenager here if they love money, and they say, of course. I asked them in London, in Barcelona, in Paris. Every teenager is the same, that they want to have economic power. And so our paid work experience program gives us the undivided attention of them for 8,500 TikToks. And I use that as the measure because so many people think that they can use TikTok to engage teenagers. But actually, that's for a fraction of a second. And most messages that we need to land are much more complicated than a message that you can land in that amount of time. And through that payment, those teenagers experience actual work. They experience the pain of filling in the forms with your bank details. They experience the requirement to meet a deadline to get paid. They experience the joy of receiving your first paycheck and the reward for your work. And what they also experience is that other people value their ideas. Economically, they have put a price on those teenagers' ideas. And what that has driven is confidence from those teenagers. The most common question when we start engaging teenagers on paid work experience at the start is this a scam? Why on earth would you be paying me for my ideas? 6 weeks later, the most commonly asked question is, who owns the IP of my idea? That journey over 6 weeks is a measure of confidence, and we actually measure their confidence across all of those soft skills that Ger has talked about. So actually, what we see is that startup journey is actually a secret educational tool. A lot of people assume that training entrepreneurship is just about the economic journey of starting a business. But in truth, it's about developing the 21st century skills that we need across the labour markets.
Thanks, Hugo. I also think there's something about courageous partnerships in there. So every year, and I use the UK as an example, I know it happens elsewhere, every year in August, the young people get their examination results. And in the newspapers, they will say, haven't they done well? Depends which newspaper you read, right? But the newspapers I read, they will say, haven't they done well? Approximately 2 weeks later, the Confederation of British Industry will say they may have done well in their exams, but they're unemployable because they haven't got the skills we need. What we see through approaches like Startup Sherpas is actually to say to those CBI people, if you want the right people to come to you, you need to stop complaining, you need to get off the fence, roll up your sleeves and join us, because if it takes a village to raise a child, you too have a responsibility. So that partnership of organizations where there is a need for recruitment or a difficulty in recruitment to sponsor programs and actually through that get paid work experience, I think is a very clever thing to do. And time will show, I have no doubt, time will show that this plays dividend. And what I like about it is much of this is in the real world. I'm all for technology, and we'll come to Jason in a second, and I love what they do. I adore what they do. But I'm always reminded that for all the technology and all the online lives that we lead, my youngest daughter's happiest day in 2020 was after a long lockdown. It was the day when she went to school. And she hugged her friends from 2 meters or whatever it was. And she saw her teachers who she loves. So we need to always ensure that balance. Thank you so much, Hugo. Jason Holt takes us to places. That's how I see you. Right? There's about writing narratives of the possible. When I was a little boy, I went on a school trip to Rotterdam in the Netherlands, where I grew up. And it was then the largest port in the world, mainly oil imports at the time. And there was a railway station, and it showed you where all those goods went. And they went behind the Iron Curtain. They went into Poland, as was in those days, and the Soviet Union. And I used to come home as a child and mark on the atlas the places I would like to visit when I was a grown-up. I still have that atlas. And that was it, really. That was it. I could read in a book. My children, when they grew up, they could go online. So they traveled better. We are now at a time where we can build our own environments, right? So we can bring elements of awe and wonder into learning experiences that we've never had. And very importantly, we can take the poorest children all over the world if that's what we wanted to do. Right. So metaverse learning for me is something magical, and for somebody who can't work a clicker, right, the work they do is absolutely amazing. Jason, just tell us a bit. Right?
Thank you, Gareth, and great to be here. And thank you, Seta, Victor, for this hospitality and this great opportunity. I think we are in a magical moment in education. Use that word, magic. And so, metaverse learning, we bring the metaverse, the world of virtual, to anyone wherever they are, whatever status, whatever part of life they are in. And if I can share a story of my own, which is that so we are all about bringing simulation in a way that engages. It's all about immersing learners and engaging them in a way they can't be engaged in any other way, otherwise being in the wonderful Kidzania as an example. And a week ago, I was in a careers fair in the UK, and a young lady with their parents came to our Metaverse Learning stand and asked us, could I try your headset? I'm really interested in engineering. And the parents looked at the daughter and said, what do you mean engineering? You want to be a doctor? She said, no, I'm really interested in engineering. Can I try your virtual engineering experience? So she put on the headset and loved it and said to the parents, can you try this? And they also tried the headset. She loved the experience. And that afternoon, she signed on to the college course in engineering, and she will one day be an engineer. And so the power of the virtual world, the ability to connect to a line of work in no other way than either coming to this wonderful place, is the power of the metaverse, and solves a problem. To Seta's point, if you don't see it, you don't know it. And what we've done at Metaverse is to really solve that problem, deal with the gatekeepers, the parents, to allow children or adults to experience healthcare, engineering, sustainability skills. If they have special learning needs, to be able to help them transition into work without ever having to worry about the stress, the anxiety that it might be if you were doing it for real. And in the UK, we're now working with about 75% of colleges in the market in all those different areas. And our plan is to build a library unsurpassed in this world of bringing all sorts of professions. Think of a flight simulator. A pilot trains on a flight simulator before they actually do it for real. Well, this is what you can do with the metaverse. You can try, you can learn safely without any repercussion, immersed in a very anxious situation. And of course, we all know the best way of learning is through mistakes. And you can make mistakes without any repercussion to you or the patient or the people around you. And this is what we are excited about, being in education now, hearing from Hugo, no doubt hearing from you, Ben, where technology can genuinely disrupt the status quo and accelerate change. And that's what we're really excited to be here and talk about.
What's your favorite environment that you've built?
So I'm particularly excited around, I love all my environments that we've created. I mean, bearing in mind that a lot of everything we've done is in partnership.
Yes.
So the partners with employers, with institutions, schools, colleges, universities, awarding organizations. And every time we build a new one, it's like, wow, this is better than the last, because it gets better, the fidelity gets better. We've just created a whole suite of programs in ESOL, learning English for those who are not natural English speakers. English language is so hard to speak without context. So we've just launched ways in which you can learn English going into hospital, learning English going into a supermarket or going into a travel agent. And so that contextualized learning, that interactivity is magic. How else, learning English with your audiobook or a textbook is never going to be as interactive, engaging as learning English in the real world, but virtual.
Thanks, Jason. What all three in some shape or form have in common is a notion of what I would call apprenticeships. Yeah, much undervalued. I think in value, thankfully, on the up. So we're talking about junior apprenticeships, we're talking about measuring apprenticeships and outcomes. Can you see things like, within reason, of course, because there's always a balance, things like targeted work experience or apprenticeships or internships in part happen in virtual environments?
So we get asked a lot, hang on, does this replace the real world? Could you live 24/7 in a virtual world? Well, no, we're not. We don't believe that's the right thing. We believe in a hybrid approach in the way that we all live in a hybrid world. And so a blended journey where maybe a learner gets to a certain point. So for example, if they become a nurse, they do, say, the first few modules in classroom, and then they bring the theory into the real world through a virtual series of scenarios. And we really invite you to join our stand just outside here to try it for yourself. So it's a combination of the classroom, the face-to-face, and the virtual, which could be done at home or could be done in the class, where the teacher is saying, okay, you've learned the theory, now what? Let's look at the virtual world and bring into practice what you've learned stage by stage by stage, but you're seeing it in reality on screen.
Thank you. I think we need to, I love it when technology serves the learner in all sorts of ways, right? In small ways and in big ways. And that's what it is. It will never replace. But I think that finding that delicate line to walk is such an interesting exercise. And you can see, I mean, I know, for example, that to a degree, both Hugo and you work with very similar organizations, but on slightly different agendas. And that's where the jigsaw comes together again. And I love that. The bit that we've got wrong for a very long time for young people is measuring. And we've got to the point where measuring in educational and schooling terms equals testing. And we really have to dispel that myth. I'm not against testing, but we just need to know what the place of testing is in all of this, right? So if I give Victor 100 words in Dutch and I give him 2 hours, I might test how much he has remembered. I'm not sure how useful that is to him, but if that's what I want to do, that's what I can do. But when it comes, we set out as schools, as ministries, as QCDC, as businesses, we set out our values and aims. If we set out our values and aims and we believe in them, then we mustn't then start to measure other people's values and aims. We need to measure our own. And that goes for young people. And actually, it has always struck me that for adults, we kind of do that. It's called LinkedIn. Used better than by some people than by others. But in essence, LinkedIn gives me a chance to say, look who I am. And it's evidence-based. So I forever, and then I bumped into a guy called Ben Mason, and then I realized that my dream had come true. So I love Ben because I don't need to worry about what I call, really simply, forgive my simpleness, what I call LinkedIn for young people. But he will explain that much better. Ben, my global bridge, why, which is always really important, and how, and who for.
Hello. Thank you. Can you hear me okay? Well, thank you for the invitation, Victor, to be here. It's a pleasure to be in Qatar. It's my first time in the Middle East, and back home where I live in Scotland, it's 9 degrees. So you can imagine I'm coping well with the heat. But yes, my global bridge, I was a teacher for 16 years and witnessed firsthand, certainly in the UK, a broken system when it comes to helping young people evidence their talents and essentially engage with their future, i.e. the future world of work and industry. And the more countries we've visited, actually the similarities are true in that we teach to what we're measured by, which in the majority of countries, as Ger says, is academic outcomes. Yet we've never been better at identifying young people with more diverse skills, with challenges to learning. And actually the world of industry is driving the need to evidence more skills from young people, more character traits. In the UK, PwC and Siemens have actually taken academic grades off their application form. So I'm in school for 7 years to create a certificate of grades, which I can't add to the initial application form. So we created a hybrid mix of Instagram and LinkedIn for education. And you can probably already start to imagine what that looks like. So the Instagram reference is we're revolutionizing how schools and education evidence student outcomes. So instead of it just being certificates, it might be a video of a performance, a sporting performance, a theatre performance, a science experiment, a music audio clip, something they do out of school that they as an individual value, that the school isn't able to value because they can't get an exam grade in it. So what we're looking to do is allow schools to evidence, reflect, and measure all of the wider skills and character traits that young people have, which is inclusive of all learners, which is a big challenge, and for the benefit of all learners, and then take that information and give the students a digital URL, a bit like a LinkedIn profile, and connect them with their future, whether that's work experience, apprenticeships, volunteering, or an actual role at the end of it. And so not only do we give the students a way to transform how they evidence themselves in a way that industry wants to see their talents, we give a school the ability to measure the impact of that, not only on a school but a national perspective, and we give industry the ability to connect with a sustainable talent pipeline. Now, name me a business that doesn't want to have visibility of their future workforce and the skills coming through the pipeline. And we also give them, therefore, the ability to measure all of their social impact, their CSR, all the things that industry is looking to do to support their community and their young people.
Thank you. I test things out on my children at home, and my now 18-year-old loved it, and her reaction, like the reaction to Startup Sherpas, like the reaction to Metaverse Learning, and like the reaction to Kidzania was, and 18-year-olds do that brilliantly, don't they, when they say that. She says, I wish that had been around when I was younger. Right? But it's true, isn't it? Right? And I think if we look at these developments, then I wish it had been around when I was younger. And you can totally see the value in this. I wanted to go to, last but certainly not least, to QCDC. And there is a football analogy. I'm a bit of a football fan. I supported Ajax Amsterdam. I think Johan Cruyff is the greatest thing that ever touched the football. And when he became a manager, he was very interesting because he very rarely sat on the touchline. He went up into the stadium so that he could see everything that was going on. And I think of QCDC as sitting somewhere up in the stands, right? The reason being is somebody needs to see what goes on, because otherwise you never score a goal, kind of thing. And we met, I'm not going to tell them how long ago, but a long time ago, Dr. Taj. And I wanted to ask you two QCDC questions, really. One is, because I need to say this, so you've heard these guys here now. The big exercise is the partnership bit, because one of the things that we've been talking about constantly all week is Qatar is different to the UK, is different to Spain, is different to wherever. How do we get what we're doing to fit in a mold? How do we need to change it? Do we need to turn it upside down? But because this is not a sales act, this is about getting it to work for young people. And that means you adapt to where you are to make it work. And we need partners. So Dr. Taj, in Qatari terms, what is the value of careers guidance for both education and the labor market? How do you see that?
Well, I think this is a classical question that we usually have. Assalamu alaikum. I would answer it in a very specific way in relation to the Qatar context. I feel that the state of Qatar has invested greatly in both education system and labor market. Nonetheless, and for purposes of maximizing the returns on investment in both systems, there is a desperate need to link the two together. Because currently, as we might all know, that there is a huge gap between education outcomes and labor market needs. So this gap has to be bridged. And I feel that career guidance, as being inspired by QCDC, we have been doing our best not only to link the two systems together, but also to link them with the needs and aspirations of the people concerned, especially young people. And if we do this, that would help, as a result, it would help in achieving or further achievement of sustainable development objectives as stipulated by Qatar National Vision 2030. So this is the value, and I see it as we have to value this value. And we are doing our best in order to bring all stakeholders through what we created as Career Guidance Stakeholder Platform in order for people to pull together to achieve that end results. And it's a continuous process. So there is a good effort invested by Ministry of Education, Ministry of Labor, Ministry of Civil Service Bureau, and other stakeholders in bringing this and in collaboration with QCDC to bridge this gap, and especially to concentrate on the needs and aspirations of young people to see their future careers and how they could really achieve them.
Thank you. I think there's something really important in these things, and if we unpack some of those, and I say that to my children very often, is the one thing that's not negotiable in your life is that you will need to be able to cope with the unexpected items in the bagging area of life. Change is not negotiable, and the pace of change is increasingly also not negotiable. So, and we should see that as a positive. We need to equip our young people to be confident enough to take those things on. The other thing, and I was going to ask you about that in a Qatari, again, context, is insights become incredibly important. Insights of the change required, what needs to be done, and the pace of it. So insights lead to trends and trends analysis. So if you look at Qatar 2024, could I ask you your QCDC's view of the current market, the current trends? And if I only wish, but if I were 18, what would you tell me in terms of trends to look out for?
Well, this looks like a difficult question.
I know. I did that deliberately. You know that, don't you?
Well, I think change is inevitable, and specifically within the context of Qatar. It's very dynamic state, very much growing, especially in terms of education and labor market, and it is part and parcel of the international global forces which are operating. So Qatar is not isolated from the global forces that you see. And as a result of this, we need to invest a great deal of time, efforts, and resources into managing the change. And the change which is reflected in labor market, especially in terms of labor market trends, is also reflected in terms of career trends. And I feel career trends in Qatar are of two types: continuing career trends and new and emergent career trends. And that has specific implications for the labor market trends. So, for example, Qatar, in its effort to transition into a knowledge-based economy, has to deal with both types of STEM careers, conventional careers that we know now, and also new and emergent STEM careers. And at the same time, we have to look at the impact of technology on transforming all this. So STEM careers and conventional and modern as well, they are trend careers. But they are also labor market trends, continuing as well as new. For example, most of the school students, most of university graduates, they have to know that skill hiring or skill-based hiring is important. And labor market is no longer driven by the academic degree or certificate that you are having. So skill-based hiring is important. Another thing that, and I think can share it with our director of QCDC, Abdullah Nasuri, we used to speak about career portfolios. And one of the important issues in the labor market trends in Qatar is, for example, part-time jobs and also consultancy-based jobs. And I myself am working on this kind of contract-based employment, and also remote and distance learning and distant working are also important trends in the labor market. And there are many other things which are also experienced in Western industrialized countries, and Qatar is no longer this separating itself from this. So these are examples of labor market trends and labor and career trends in Qatar, which are really true and they're experienced, and we're building on them as well, and we're preparing students. If students in the schools, they have to experience and they have to be career ready for their future, they have to emphasize a specific set of skills. For example, digital skills, as you have been speaking about technology and how technology is impacting, especially it is accelerating in areas like artificial intelligence, big data, and even machine learning and other things. These are examples of the skills that they are having, and I can add also personal skills and what you have presented in your 50 years old slide skills, so we can reorganize them in terms of personal and soft skills as well. These are the kinds of skills that I would like our colleagues here, the school advisors, to concentrate on equipping their students with those and providing them with opportunities which would help them to acquire and experience and practice those skills.
Thank you so much. Just a couple of observations, because you come across things all the time. And I just wanted to highlight that we must be careful. I showed the video of the jar earlier. And my very good friend Carla Rinaldi, the co-founder of the Reggio Emilia approach in Reggio Emilia in Italy, which is initially about early years learning, she and I now talk about 0 to 99. Okay, this schooling might end at 18. Education ends at 99. And we will have issues about constant reskilling of the workforce in a whole range of scenarios. So if you have a school, your site manager all of a sudden needs to think much more carefully about buying sustainable cleaning materials, right? So the change that we face does not sit in jars. It affects everybody. And that's an incredibly important piece to realize, because when we talk about AI in education, for example, everybody says, 65% of the jobs that our children will be doing don't exist yet. I have two questions. One, who's come up with that number? And where is their crystal ball? And secondly, nobody talks about the people who are already working and how their lives will change. I think that's a really important thing. I think the other thing is we need to bear in mind that education and schooling, we've made a mistake in the past. And it's a big one, and we need to readjust it. It's our mistake, and we need to readjust it on behalf of our young people. Education and schooling are not there to serve the economy. They're there to serve the society of which the economy is a part. Because I want my children to come out of schooling as good, decent people who understand, who are social entrepreneurs, who are emotionally intelligent entrepreneurs. And I welcome from all my guests here today, that's been an underlying theme. We haven't talked much about grade A and whatever else. And I'm going to come to your questions in a second. The mind, once enlightened, cannot become dark. And I think, Thomas Paine, I think that is at the root of all education. That is what you see from your stand and then go to the touchline and affect. That is why you measure differently. That is why you build and why you write narratives that didn't exist. And that is why experience is everything. And I think if we take that away from today, because people sometimes say, I went on a course and I got a certificate. The certificate for today is for you to go away and feel and think a little bit differently. I think that was the plan. So if we've got a roving mic, that's how we got a bit of time, haven't we? So as you see, did you notice I need to ask for permission. If we have a roving mic, one, if you want to ask questions, please ask them. Secondly, if you don't want to ask the questions in here, find it, because I sometimes don't like ask questions in public. Find my friends afterwards, and you've had the chance to use your phone and find out where they live. So be in touch in that way as well to begin with. So, have we got any questions? There don't have to be any questions, but if there are, that would be great. There's a question. I'm now meant to do that guy, the tall gentleman at the back.
Thank you so much. It was very insightful and enlightening on so many different topics. The question is to Jason specifically. I have a question because he spoke a lot about metaverse learning and the immersive experiences that they get. And Dr. Ger Graus spoke a lot about how immersive experiences are important and education being key in two ways, one being relationship rich and the other one being experience based. And the part that I want to talk about, or actually both parts, to what extent is the metaverse experience interactive? In a way, is it one way where the student gets more in-depth experiences, or they get to choose, they get to make preferences? And I guess that adds a lot of complexity to the work that you do if it's interactive, but that's one part, and maybe that's something you see for the future. And the second part is, how real are the relationships that students make within those experiences? In other words, do they interact with real people? Dr. Ger Graus again made a very good remark about Kidzania and the work that's being done here when students come in and see a representative. To them, that's not a representative, that's a real pilot or a real person. So to what extent do students get to make relationships within those environments?
That's a great question and a great opportunity to I think to talk about how important experience is in the learning. One piece of data that always hits me is 90% of learning is experiential. And so anything that can bring to life learning, and we've heard some wonderful ways in which Ben and Hugo do that, but experiencing, and just to be absolutely clear, the metaverse is a term of, for me, the virtual world, the simulated world, the real world, but in virtual. So to your question around how interactive is it and how real is it, I think your first point is it the design of all our programs, whether it's in healthcare, engineering, manufacturing, teaching English, has been designed by teachers, by students, by those experts who, in partnership with us, co-create the pinch points, the pain points. Where is it really, really hard to teach certain elements of that occupation? So it could be, for example, when we first launched, it was treating a patient with COVID. You don't really want to learn that for the first time in a hospital ward. Much better to learn it in a virtual sense, so no harm done. To you, patient, you can make mistakes, and it's fine. You learn. So the branching of that, and what we're doing more and more now, is that the experience will be branched. So depending on what the learner does, will then lead to a whole set of new sequences that's tailored to their experience. We're just launching this very shortly. So rather than it being a linear experience of a scenario from A to Z, actually it very much depends on the React learner as to what happens step by step by step. And very happy to talk to you after this. To the second point around the relationship forming, I think we have to be very, very careful for that. And I think that's probably the reason for your question. We are using this primarily as an engagement tool to enrich a curriculum, to engage in the way that Kidzania engages, but online, 365 days, 24/7. Or to learn in depth areas that you might not see, the 50 other professions in an airport that you may not see if you are traveling as a passenger, and to get to a point where you're ready to do it for real. How you engage with other learners in a multi-play situation, which may be in the back of your mind, get very cautious of. We have a product called Metaverse Hub where we can have hundreds of thousands of people in one place interacting with one another, and super exciting. So you could have a way in which you can network, you can talk to teachers, you can have career days in the metaverse where you're talking to employers, talking to teachers, talking to other students as part of the learner experience in that institution. Super exciting. And we're just at the beginning of that journey. And again, very happy to show you that if you have time afterwards.
Thank you. If I can just pick up on that a little bit. My very good friend Carla Rinaldi always says, we must trust the children as much as they trust us. And when I knock on my 18-year-old daughter's door when she's now revising for her exams, she will be on her laptop and on her iPad and on her phone, and the television will be on in the background, and she's talking to her friends at the same time. And I'm walking in there thinking, oh my God. But it works. She and her generation, the technology generation, have found a way themselves to connect. She connects only with people who she knows and can have conversations with. So I think we need to, in our planning, also take into consideration as well, how are our young people functioning? And sometimes you say, well, does it have interactivity and can the youngsters connect? And you're into that whole safeguarding thing. Sometimes we need to kind of go, well, what are they already doing anyway? And can we just let them get on with it? And can we trust them? And rather than becoming the teachers, can we become the lollipop people who help them cross the road safely if they're not sure? So it's an interesting thing, but we must keep putting those young people and the brilliant things they can already do. We must put that in the middle. But thank you for that question. Are there any other questions that we have? You have another one. Shall we give him another one? Yeah, shall we? Shall we let him?
I don't want to take the stage, so it can wait.
Go ahead.
I MC the place and say any other questions.
No. You're fine. Go on.
My question is actually to Ben. Very interesting work and some of the insights that are coming out specifically from the States, but I think Dr. Taj would also agree that employers are not seeing enough evidence of skills. And Dr. Taj spoke about personal skills and soft skills, and some people call them interdisciplinary skills. Some people call them 21st century skills. I think the term is not yet decided, but it is an agreed upon consensus that there isn't enough information in transcripts that speak to the incredible ability of the young generation to learn from different sources, iPads, TVs at the same time. They're very perceptive to knowledge. They're different, just like our generation is different from previous generations. But sticking with the point, to what extent do you see the work that you do augmenting official transcripts that are released by schools and universities? And I was reading a report the other day by the National Association for Colleges and Employers, NACE, in the US, that said the percentage of employers that rely on transcripts just dropped from 73% in 2021 to 30% in 2023, indicating a huge loss of trust in how much do these certificates, transcripts, academic records communicate to employers about whether this is a successful candidate or not. So the part that I'm very curious about is, to what extent do you see the work you do? I know you specified an age category for the work that you do right now, blending media-rich sort of stuff like Instagram-like with a LinkedIn-like profile. Is this usable by employers? Have you, in your experience, worked with employers where they said this is really useful, would like to rely on it as a source of evidence of employability and future success?
But Ben, can I just, because part of your question, I discussed it with Ben last week, and I think, yeah, in order for us to relate it to the Qatari context, it would be good to consider what we have already discussed as the relevance to Qatari situation.
Yes, I think in the same way that Professor Ger talked about the jigsaw of making opportunities a reality for young people, it's the same for businesses in the recruitment world. So one of the roles that I had at my school as a teacher was the director of recruitment. And it was, for me, the challenge was putting the pieces of the jigsaw together as to whether this student was going to get a place at the school. So if we were looking at them for sport, it was evidence they could play sport. It was a video. If they were coming as a musician, it was an audio clip. If they were an academic, it was some example work. And so what I needed as the recruiter in that environment was all the pieces of the jigsaw to come together to make that candidate an offer. It's exactly the same in the world of industry. the more information that I have as a recruiter about the candidate, the more informed my decision can be. But if the only information that I've got is academic certificates, then I don't know if they're going to get on with my other colleagues, if they're a team player, if they've got the character culture fit to fit our workplace. So one of the examples I was presenting to the Saudi government actually a few weeks ago, along with the World Economic Forum and McKinsey with the UK government. And one of the challenges that they said in Saudi was the credentialing of wider skills and character traits. So the example they gave was, what's more of more value to a business, a software developer who's done a 5-year degree and has a degree, or a software developer that's done 5 years experience in the workplace? And how do you credential which has most value? So for us, in this first stage, it's around giving education something that it doesn't currently have, which is the ability to evidence a broader range of skills and talents and academic ability, or if that isn't there, other talents that the young person might have. So an inclusive way to measure student outcomes. For me, the next frontier that education needs to look at is how we credential those wider skills and talents. Because actually, until we credential them and add value to them, they're always going to come second nature to academic outcomes. Because again, as I started, we teach to what we're measured by. And while schools are measured by academic standards and academic league tables, as a teacher, I'm going to teach to what I'm measured by. Whereas if we add value and credential skills, and I as a teacher am then teaching to the measurement of those skills, I'm obviously going to spend more time teaching that. So it's around creating a more inclusive way to measure student outcomes, which is what we do. And then I think another big challenge is the connectivity of the current system, which is unfortunately reliant heavily on personality. So what my parents do, what my school teachers' contacts are, and how they're going to connect me. So one challenge that schools have is evidencing talent, and the second challenge is connecting talent. So as we've talked about, to your point, how many businesses use LinkedIn to identify their future candidates? Does it give them the information they need? Yes, because to a degree, it evidences their experience. The future generation of the workforce don't have that. Their entire talent base gets distilled into a list of grades and certificates. So what we're bringing is a way for education to transform how it measures the future talent, and a way for industry to tap into that talent and change the way that we transition talent from education to industry. I hope that answered it, maybe a bit long-worded.
Thanks, Ben. I just wanted to bring Hugo in at this stage. Hugo, what in your evaluation feedback from your squads on task, be it paid work experience or not, what goes back to the sponsor, the employer? What goes back in terms of that dialogue that needs to change? Or
Absolutely. So when a student goes through one of our programs, if they are doing the 6-week program, they're doing 24 hours of work. And so through that process, we're measuring pre and post their confidence in those soft skills. And the confidence in those soft skills, we usually see between a 40 to 60% increase in the student's perceived confidence in each of those 21st century skills. And we then also get the parents' view and the teacher's view to triangulate the increasing confidence across those skills. But they're also creating a huge amount of ideas that we're also have them collaborating with 100 other students. So we're able to analyze their ideas to measure things like lateral thinking, like how social they are. We can measure whether they do their work when it's set or whether they need a deadline extension. And so we actually are able to measure all of those soft skills and to be able to provide all of the evidence down to every 25-minute piece of work that student has done through the program. And what that does is builds up a profile for the employers to see both how a whole group think about a problem that they've set, but also an individual student's suitability for different career pathways. So that's now being used in the insurance industry as a direct recruitment vehicle into their apprenticeships, where they're choosing the apprenticeships by the work that they've done through those programs.
Thank you. One final comment. I go back to my friend who sits in the stands and see whether you have any Qatar information or thoughts that you can pass on to this.
Well, I think we have a lot to say, especially for our friends and colleagues in Ministry of Education and for our partners. We are very much open and we are very much dedicated to partner with others who are really having programs that could be impactful. We are collaborating with the school advisors, especially in public schools, and we're having a specific set of professional development programs which would help them to develop services and programs needed by the students to prepare them for their future careers. And I think it's a good opportunity for all of you to see how you can experiment with the products that you are having, and also how can you support us in QCDC in implementing our strategies and our plans and programs and services in collaboration with all relevant stakeholders. And I think this is a continuation of a previous work that we are having as developing synergies through collaboration with strong partners. And I trust your strengths and I trust the dedication of our partners in the law in Qatar, and we can come together to have good impact and to benefit our target audience, both at national levels, policy making, decision making, and at end users, as students and authors. And I thank you for your participation in the Career Village. And I think, as our colleagues here in QCDC would say, and I am saying this on their behalf, this is a good opportunity and it is the beginning. It is not the end. And we are looking forward to more collaboration and coordination.
On that note, I'd like to thank the panelists, Dr. Taj, Ben, Jason, what's your name again? Hugo. And thank you for being here. And the idea is that this is the first day of a long discussion. So thanks for joining us. Seta.
Thank you.